I was on my knees in the basement workshop, crowbar in hand, when something underneath the old subfloor didn't move the way wood is supposed to move. I'm 63 years old. I've lived in this house on Carling Avenue in Ottawa for 23 years. I know every corner of this basement the way you know a face you've been looking at your whole life. The low ceiling that makes me duck near the furnace. The corner where water used to pool before I regraded the yard. The workshop my father-in-law helped me frame out the year after the wedding. I thought I knew it all. I was wrong. My name is Stanley Howell, and what I found that Thursday afternoon in late October, behind a rusted sheet of pegboard tucked flat inside the hollow below a section of squeaky subfloor, wasn't just a metal box. It was the end of 21 years of what I thought was a marriage. Inside that box was $8,000 in Canadian hundreds, a prepaid flip phone I'd never seen, a USB drive in a small Ziploc bag, and a folded document printed not handwritten, with one word at the top in capital letters. Transition. I want you to picture what it feels like to kneel on a cold concrete floor in your own basement, in a house you bought together, holding a piece of paper that uses your signature as a line item in someone else's plan. That's where this story starts. Miriam and I met at a government conference in Gatineau in the early 2000s. She was working in procurement for a crown corporation. I was there representing my survey team. We were introduced over bad coffee and fluorescent lighting. And somehow that led to 21 years of Saturday morning trips to the Byward Market, winter drives out to Almonte, 2 stepchildren from my first marriage who eventually stopped calling me Miriam's husband, and started calling me something that actually meant something. She's meticulous. That's the word most people use for her. Spreadsheets for the grocery budget. A labeled binder for every insurance policy we carry. When we refinanced the house in 2018 to pay off her daughter's student loan, Miriam had the paperwork organized 3 days before our appointment at the branch. I sign where she tells me to sign. I've done that for years. It works. Or I thought it worked. This October, I decided to surprise her with the workshop. She'd mentioned twice over the summer that she wanted a proper space for her quilting. Just mentioned it, the way people mention things they don't expect to actually happen. The basement workshop was mine. Table saw, drill press, a pegboard wall of tools I hadn't touched seriously since I retired 2 years ago. I figured I'd clear it out, patch the subfloor that had been squeaking for 2 winters, lay down proper flooring, add a big work table and some shelving. A real room. Something she'd walk into and feel like someone had been paying attention. She was in Toronto for the week, visiting her sister Connie in Scarborough. It felt like the right time. I'd pulled up most of the squeaky section without much trouble. But near the far wall, underneath the pegboard, the crowbar caught an edge that wasn't a nail. I thought it was an old junction box, a dropped piece of scrap. I pulled harder, the board came up, and there it was, sitting in the hollow between 2 floor joists like it had always belonged there. A gray metal cash box, the kind with the latch on the front, maybe 30 centimeters long, locked. I sat back on my heels and just looked at it for a moment. My brain suggested explanations. Previous owner left something behind. One of the grandchildren hid a Halloween haul. Something from before we bought the place. But I knew, even before I picked it up, that none of those were right, because the box wasn't dusty, it was clean, recently cleaned. I found a flathead in the tool rack and worked the latch in about 4 minutes. It wasn't a serious lock. Whatever security it offered wasn't meant to stop someone who lived here. It was meant to look invisible. The hundreds were rubber-banded in 2 stacks. Not bank-wrapped, just rubber-banded. Canadian bills, mostly from recent print runs by the look of them. I didn't count right then. 8,000 was my best guess. Under the money was the prepaid phone, a basic flip model, no case. The kind you buy with cash at a Shoppers Drug Mart checkout and activate with a prepaid SIM. No fingerprint lock, no pin, just open. Under the phone, the USB drive in its little bag, and under that the folded paper. I set everything else aside and opened the paper on the workshop floor. It was 2 pages printed on standard copy paper. The header, transition in caps. Below it a date, 3 weeks ago. And below that a sequence, numbered steps, clean and clinical. Step 1. Confirm HELOC application submitted and in review. Step 2. Beneficiary update on RRSP. Stanley's signature required at branch. Suggest Tuesday or Thursday visit, low traffic. Step 3. Funds transfer timeline. 12 to 14 business days after signature. Step 4. Close joint checking after confirmation. Step 5. List property within 60 days of transfer completion. There was a name at the bottom of the second page, not her name, an initial and a last name, G. Parrish. Below that a cell number with a 416 area code, Toronto. I read the document 3 times sitting on that cold floor. My knees were aching, I didn't notice. The HELOC. Home equity line of credit. We owned this house outright, paid the mortgage in full 6 years ago. That equity was everything. That equity was my retirement, our retirement. $230,000 in untouched home value. The kind of number that means you can actually stay in Ottawa when property prices do what Ottawa property prices do. Someone had been trying to turn it into a check made out to somewhere else. The RRSP. I'd built that account over 31 years with the federal government. It doesn't have a lot of zeros because survey pay isn't executive pay, but it's enough. It's what steady and patient looks like after 3 decades. And my wife's name was already a beneficiary, which is standard when you trust the person sharing your house. A signature on a form at the branch would change things in ways I didn't yet fully understand. But I was beginning to understand the shape of it. My hands felt heavier than usual when I put the paper down, not shaking, heavy. There's something specific about the cold of a basement in October in Ottawa. It's a different cold than January. It sits low. It settles into joints you forgot you had. I sat in that cold for a while without moving. Then I picked up the prepaid phone. No PIN. The home screen came up clean. 2 apps, messages and calls, nothing else, like it had been stripped for a purpose. 1 thread. Contact saved as GP. The most recent message had come in that morning. From GP package cleared compliance review. Monday confirmed? From Miriam, yes, he thinks we're going for coffee. He was me. I put the phone down carefully on the concrete beside me, the way you set down something breakable. Then I sat there for a long moment, listening to the furnace cycle on in the next room. I scrolled up through the messages eventually. There were 20 or so, spread over 6 weeks. From GP, don't trigger anything at the branch before the HELOC is approved. Any unusual activity flags the account. From Miriam, understood. He doesn't look at the statements anyway. From GP to beneficiary form has to be witnessed but not by a family member. We can use a notary on King Street, I'll set it up. From Miriam, what if he asks about the appointment? From routine review, happens every few years, he'll accept that. He'll accept that. I've been in this country my whole life. I served on a federal survey team through rain and permafrost and bureaucratic stupidity that would break a less patient man. I raised 2 kids from my first marriage mostly on my own, and sent them into the world with a firm handshake and the ability to read a topographic map. I am not someone who simply accepts things. But there was a message telling a stranger, confidently, that I would. I went upstairs, made tea, properly the way my mother taught me, leaves in a pot, not a bag in a mug. I stood at the kitchen window and looked out at the backyard. The maple had already dropped everything. First frost had come early this year. The garden looked closed for the season. I drank the tea at the counter and didn't fall apart. I thought about why. I think it's because the grief and the anger weren't competing with each other. They arrived together, at the same volume, and in some strange way they canceled the noise out. What was left felt like clarity. I thought about who I could call. Ron Shetler had been my closest friend for 40 years, but Ron talks. He'd mean well and say something to the wrong person. My son Elliot lives in Vancouver, too far, and he'd get on a plane the moment I told him, which I didn't want. I settled on Bruce. Bruce Whitmore, retired after 26 years with the Ontario Provincial Police, the last 8 as a detective with the Financial Crimes Unit in Kingston. He'd moved to Kemptville a few years back. Quiet man. Listens more than he talks. The kind of person who's heard enough hard things that he doesn't flinch at one more. He picked up on the second ring. Stan, you all right? I almost said yes, the word was right there. Instead I said, no, not exactly. You got an hour? A pause, then start talking. I told him everything. The box, the phone, the document, the messages. I read him the HELOC step and the RRSP beneficiary line verbatim. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a longer silence. G. Parrish, he said. That name mean anything to you? Nothing. 416 is Toronto. What does Miriam do out there when she visits her sister? Shops, has lunch, goes to Connie's place in Scarborough. How often? 3-4 times a year. Another silence, Bruce organizing it. I could almost hear him putting pieces in order. Stan, listen to me. What you're describing isn't an affair. It might look like one, but that's not what this is. This is financial extraction. It's been planned in stages, timed around your signature, and coordinated with someone who knows exactly what they're doing. The HELOC alone, that's the house. You understand that? They get you to sign a HELOC, they can draw against it whenever they want. Add the RRSP beneficiary change and they've got access to your retirement income stream after you're gone. This isn't impulsive, this has been organized. I knew he was right. I'd known it since the workshop floor. What do? I asked. Nothing yet. You don't confront her, You don't change your behavior. You don't even sigh differently when she calls tonight. You act exactly the same as you would on any Thursday when she's in Toronto. And then? Tomorrow morning you call a family lawyer. Not a friend's referral, a real practitioner who handles financial misconduct in marital proceedings. I know someone. Janet Fournier, she's in Centertown. Does family law and fraud cases both. I'll send you the number. And G. Parrish? I'll make a call tonight. We hung up. The tea had gone cold. I poured it down the sink and stood at the window for another minute. I went back to the basement and put everything back exactly the way I'd found it. The box, the cash, the phone, the document. I replaced the floorboard section and set the crowbar back in the tool rack. The floor still squeaked in the same spot. I left it. That night Miriam called from Connie's place in Scarborough, exactly when she usually calls, 8:47 by the kitchen clock. How'd the workshop go, she asked. Good start, I said. Got the pegboard down, going to take a few more days. Don't hurt your back. Doing it properly this time. How's Connie? She's Connie, Miriam said, which is the thing she always says when she doesn't want to elaborate. We talked for 11 minutes. I made 1 cup of tea and didn't drink it. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the wall. There was a photograph there from our trip to Prince Edward Island 6 summers ago. Red sand beach. Her hair blowing sideways. Me squinting against the sun, which is what I always do in photos because I forget to expect the flash. I turned it face down. Not out of anger. Out of something I couldn't name yet. Some need for that particular version of us to stop looking at me while I figured out who we actually were. Bruce texted me Janet Fournier's number at 9:15 that night. I called her office at 8 the next morning and left a message. She called back by 8:45. We spoke for 40 minutes. She asked precise questions and at the end told me exactly what to do next. Don't touch the box, she said. Don't photograph anything with your personal phone. We'll document everything properly with a witness. Don't speak to anyone at your bank branch. And do not let anyone get your signature on anything this week. She mentioned a meeting Monday, I said. Perfect, Janet said, and I could already hear her planning. Let's talk Saturday. I spent the next 2 days doing quiet things. I drove down to the Provincial Land Registry office on Lisgar Street and requested a search on our home's title. 45 minutes and $32. Nothing had been registered yet. The HELOC application was still in review, just as the document said. But I could see it. A pending inquiry from a mortgage services company I didn't recognize. Submitted 18 days ago without my knowledge. That evening I checked our joint checking account online. Nothing alarming at first glance. But I scrolled back 6 months and started reading lines I'd never read before. 3 transfers, small amounts, under $200 each, sent to an account I didn't recognize. Spaced 4 to 5 weeks apart. Each with a memo line that said admin fee or service charge. That's what patience looks like when someone is testing whether you're watching. I wasn't, until now. Bruce called Friday afternoon. Grant Parrish, he said. Independent financial consultant, Yorkville area in Toronto. Works primarily with couples over 55 who have significant home equity and RRSP SATs. Had a complaint filed against him with CIRO, the Canadian Investment Regulatory Organization, in 2021. Insufficient disclosure, unsuitability findings. Didn't lose his registration, but the file exists. I wrote the name down, Grant Parrish. He's not a criminal, Bruce said. Not quite. He knows exactly how far he can go without crossing a line. He coordinates with a spouse, extracts the equity and retirement assets before anyone understands what's happened. And by the time the other partner figures it out, the money's moved and the marriage is over. The consulting fee comes out of what was extracted. How long has this been going on? Bruce was quiet for a moment. The messages go back 6 weeks. But Stan, the word I'd use for someone who agrees to this kind of arrangement, she didn't fall into it, she went looking for it. That landed differently than I expected. Not harder, just differently. Miriam came home Sunday evening on the 5:15 train from Union Station. I picked her up at the Ottawa train station the same way I always do, standing at the side of the car in the pickup lane while other people figure out where they're supposed to go. She had 2 bags and a cardboard bakery box from a place in Kensington Market she visits every time she's in Toronto. She kissed my cheek in the pickup lane, familiar, automatic. The way 21 years feels when it's working, or when it's performing. We had roast chicken that night. She made it. The good one, with the lemon and the herbs from the kitchen window box. We talked about her sister, about how Connie's neighborhood was changing faster than either of them expected. I asked the right questions. She gave the right answers. The dining room felt the same size it always was. Her phone buzzed twice during dinner, face down on the table. She didn't look at it. Nor did I look at the pocket of my flannel shirt, where the prepaid phone I'd been carrying all week buzzed at the exact same moments. After dinner she mentioned Grant Parrish for the first time, casually over the dishes. "You remember I mentioned that financial consultant I met at one of Connie's neighbors' get-togethers last spring?" she said. "I've been talking to him about our RRSP structure. He thinks we could be doing better in retirement. He's willing to come up to Ottawa, do a proper review." "Sure," I said. "When?" "Monday morning. He's already in town for another client." "Monday works." She looked at me the way she always looks at me when she's checking something without wanting to seem like she's checking. I kept washing the pot. "Just a preliminary conversation," she said. "No commitment." "Of course," I said. She smiled. I put the pot on the drying rack. That night I lay in bed listening to the October wind off the Ottawa River, pushing against the bedroom window. I've slept in this house through 23 winters. I know that sound. I let it be familiar. I called Janet Fournier from my car in the driveway at 7:15 Monday morning. We confirmed the plan. I told her the meeting was at the TD branch on Elgin at 10. Miriam had booked a private meeting room, which told me this had been arranged before she even got on the train home from Toronto. Janet said she'd be there by 9:50. We were the first to arrive. The private room was small, a round table, 4 chairs, a glass wall looking out onto the branch floor. Miriam set her bag down and checked her phone once. I sat across from her and looked at the table. Grant Parrish came in at 10:04, 50s. Good suit, the kind that announces itself without being obvious. A carry-on roller bag that said he traveled for work often and wanted you to notice. He had a practiced handshake and introduced himself the way people do when they expect the introduction to do work for them. "Stanley," he said. "Good to finally put a face to things." "Likewise," I said. He opened his bag and began laying documents on the table. Rate comparison charts, projected RRSP drawdown schedules, a folder with our names already printed on the cover tab. Prepared, thorough. I let him talk for 3 minutes. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and set the prepaid phone on the table between us. Grant Parrish stopped mid-sentence. I reached into my other pocket and set the folded transition document next to the phone. I smoothed it open with 2 fingers. "I found this under the subfloor in my basement workshop," I said quietly, "along with $8,000 in cash and that phone. The thread between you and my wife goes back 6 weeks. I have all of it." The room went very still, not loud, just still. Miriam's eyes dropped to the document. When they came back up, they were steady. She didn't look panicked. She looked like someone doing arithmetic. Grant Parrish straightened in his chair. "I think there may be some confusion about the nature of." "The HELOC application was submitted without my knowledge," I said. "I have the title search from the land registry. The RRSP beneficiary form was being arranged with a notary on King Street in Toronto, which I also know. The 3 transfers from our joint checking account over the past 6 months are documented. We can keep going if you'd like." The door opened. Janet Fournier walked in. She'd worn the gray blazer, which I would later learn is what she wears when she wants to communicate that the conversation has already been decided. She set her briefcase on the table without asking anyone's permission. "Mr. Parrish," she said. "Janet Fournier, Family Law and Marital Fraud Litigation, representing Mr. Howell. Notarized copies of all documentation are held off-site. I'd like to discuss the HELOC application, the coordinated RSP beneficiary modification, and the series of transfers from joint accounts. We can do that here, or we can do it at the Ontario Superior Court of Justice, which is 3 blocks east of us. Your preference." Grant Parrish looked at Miriam. Miriam didn't look back at him. He stood up, gathered his folder, zipped the roller bag with the same unhurried efficiency he'd used to open it. He said something about needing to consult his own advisors, and excused himself with the controlled calm of a man who's learned to exit rooms cleanly when rooms need to be exited. He was through the glass door in under a minute. Miriam watched the space where he'd been for a moment. Then she folded her hands on the table. "You planned this," she said. "No," I said. "You planned this. I just stopped assuming the floor was solid." Something shifted behind her eyes. Not remorse. I don't think remorse was going to be part of it. Something more like recognition, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time in a while, and finding that surprising. "What happens now?" she said. "The HELOC application gets withdrawn today," I said. "The joint accounts go under legal review. Janet handles everything from here." Miriam nodded once. She picked up her handbag and her jacket from the back of the chair. She paused at the door. "The workshop," she said. "Did you finish the floor?" "Not yet," I said. She left. I watched her walk across the branch floor and through the front doors and out onto Elgin Street without looking back. Janet sat down across from me. You all right? Getting there, I said. 3 months later, the house was still mine. The HELOC application had been formally withdrawn, and a legal notice placed on the title to prevent any further inquiries without my written consent. The RRSP beneficiary designation remained unchanged. There had never been a witnessed form, so nothing had actually been altered. The 3 joint account transfers were documented and included in the marital property proceedings Janet was handling. Grant Parish had a second complaint filed against him with CRO. This one more detailed, with a formal letter of representation attached. Whether the regulator pursues it depends on how thorough they decide to be. But the file exists now. It has a date and 2 names on it. Here's what I want to say to you directly, because I know some of you watching this right now have a small transfer on a bank statement you've been telling yourself is nothing, or a spouse who handles most of the finances because it's easier that way, and you've never questioned it because that's just how things work in your house. I'm a retired federal civil servant in Ottawa. I contributed to my TFSA every January, went to the Remembrance Day ceremony at the National War Memorial every year, and kept a box of Tim Hortons gift cards in the kitchen drawer for when the grandkids came over. I was not someone who expected to be crouching on a cold basement floor in October, holding a cash box I didn't know existed. But I was, and here's what I want you to take away. In Canada, your home's title is public record. You can walk into any provincial land registry office, or go online through your province's land records system, and run a search on your own property for under $50. If there's a HELOC inquiry, a pending registration, an encumbrance you didn't authorize, it'll be there. Your RRSP beneficiary designation is not the same as your will. It bypasses the estate process entirely. If someone changes that designation at your financial institution, your beneficiary changes, full stop. Call your bank or investment firm this week. Ask to see the current designation on file. Ask what documentation would be required to change it. Write it down. If you've been the person in your household who lets the other person handle the finances, I understand why. It feels like trust. It is trust. But trust doesn't mean absence. Once a year, sit down with every account, every statement, every policy, and read every line. Not the totals, the individual lines. And pull your credit report. In Canada, both Equifax and TransUnion offer this. TransUnion through their app is free. Equifax has a free option as well. A HELOC inquiry shows up on your credit report before it shows up anywhere else. So does anything else someone might be arranging in your name. If something feels wrong in your finances, even a small transfer you can't explain, even a form that showed up on the kitchen table that someone wanted you to sign quickly, you are allowed to ask. You are not paranoid. You are awake. The Financial Consumer Agency of Canada handles complaints like this one, and they have a phone line that answers. The workshop is finished now. I did the floor properly. Tongue and groove birch, glued and nailed. Miriam's quilting frame isn't in there. It's just tools and quiet and the particular smell of sawdust that I've always found easier to breathe in than most things. I replaced the squeaky section of subfloor too. The floor sits solid now the way it always should have. I stood in the doorway one morning last week with a coffee before the day started, just looking at it. Thinking about the hollow between the joists where the box used to sit. About how long it had been there. About how many mornings I'd walked over it on the way to the workbench without knowing. Not with bitterness. More with something like attention. The kind you develop when you've learned, the hard way, to listen for the sounds a house makes when it's trying to tell you something. Before I go, I want to hear from you. Leave a 1 if you think I handled the confrontation the right way. Leave a 2 if you think I should have spoken to Miriam privately at home before it reached a meeting room. Leave a 3 if something in this story reminded you of something in your own life. And whatever number you leave, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I read every single one. If this story hit something real for you, take 1 second and press the like button. It helps this channel reach someone tonight who might need to hear it. Someone who's been telling themselves that small bank transfer is probably nothing. Someone whose gut has been sending a signal they've been too tired to listen to. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because every week there's another story like this one. Real patterns, real consequences, and the small sounds we should have been listening to all along. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp, stay awake. This is a fictional story inspired by documented patterns of elder financial abuse and marital fraud reported across Canada, including cases on file with the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada. Names, locations, and specific details are entirely invented. If anything in this story felt too familiar, please contact a licensed family law attorney in your province, the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada at ftxcgg.ca, or your local victim services office. You are not alone.